Well, those are some mighty fine leathers up there, you got a friend. Ladies, gentlemen, and Harajam of all ages, we have been promised the upcoming patch 1.1.1 being released next Tuesday, the 8th of August. And while there was a Campfire Chat the other day going over what these patch notes would be and the ideal results of the upcoming patch as far as feel of the game as a whole, but there have been some slight changes to what we were told about. We got the full scope of the class changes happening as well as the changes happening to the game as a whole, and we will start by going through the class changes themselves. I'll just be scrolling past them for the most part, as they almost entirely just line up with the images that we were shown in the Campfire stream. Barb got some benefits to early game Fury generation, Rogue got some mostly irrelevant changes, no nerfs at least, Druid got some buffs to off-meta builds, which is nice to see, Sorcerer got a whole whack of changes, including a couple of differences from Campfire Chat images, including the removal of a change to the restorative rare Paragon node. I guess I just thought the rest of the survivability changes were good enough. Then we have this lovely little bit of formatting here, increase crackling energies damage from 2% to 3% per 20 intelligence the player has, reinforced rare glyph damage reduction increase from 10 to 15%. Yep, that probably sounded really weird when I said it out loud, and that's because that's actually two separate entries that they accidentally merged into one. Then we also have a change to the Gloves of the Illuminator changes, which is the final line is now Illuminator's first bounce occurs much closer to the player. After that, Necromancer got some pretty silly changes, major buffs to non-bone builds by allowing certain interactions across damage types, and then even more importantly, buffs to Essence Generation legendaries that were already really good. And with that then, let's move on to the more general changes for the game as a whole, which we have a lot more detail for now that they are in proper patch note format. First and foremost, the monster density changes. Every single Nightmare dungeon will have enhanced monster density. The amount depends on the individual dungeon, but I've seen metrics showing anywhere from 60% to 100% more monsters in dungeons than we had before, and that should be quite good at adding some fun to working your way through dungeons. It should also add a lot to our experience gain per time ratio doing the same activities. On top of this, they also increase the density of most zones while the Helltide is running as well, which should make Helltide more pursuable as an endgame activity and more enjoyable to take part in as well. Then we have a change that we were aware of, but given more numbers on, bosses above level 60 will now have more health than they currently do, on a scaling metric all the way up to level 150 bosses that show up in tier 100 Nightmare dungeons. At level 60 or below, boss health will be the same. At level 80, bosses will have 50% more health. At level 100, they will have 100% more health, so double. At level 120, they will have 120% bonus health, and at level 150, they will have 150% bonus health. Tied very purposely to this change is that boss monsters at level 35 or above now have a 100% chance of dropping a legendary item on death. This should heavily improve the value of farming legendaries from Nightmare dungeons as well, as it just means that you get minimum 2 legendaries at the end if it is one with a boss in it. Treasure Goblins as well have a much higher legendary drop rate from level 6 to 14, and when killed at level 15 or higher, now they have guaranteed legendary drops too, which is great, and it makes them feel more useful, honestly. Then Legion events as well now have a guaranteed legendary drop at the end of them when done at level 35 or higher. That is 3 really solid changes, making various things more valuable, and it makes bosses feel more rewarding, even if they have given them more health to work with as well. Then we have a number of changes with how barriers work in the game, which is bigger than you might think. Bonus damage or effects now interact with active barriers. For example, if an enemy had a barrier beforehand, you couldn't make them vulnerable or apply damage over time if the barrier was on. The barrier would block these effects until the barrier was removed from them. Now these no longer happen, and things like the exploit glyph will apply vulnerable even to enemies with barriers. The cost of refunding skill and Paragon points as well has been reduced a fair amount. We were told to expect 40%, and while that is a true statement, it is only technically correct.
The best kind of correct.
By that, what I mean is that these costs have been lowered on a scaling basis depending on your level. At level 50, these costs are 12% lower than they were beforehand. At level 60, they are 18% lower. At level 70, they are 24% lower. At level 80, 30% lower. And then at level 100, they are 40% lower. So, when they told us 40%, what they were implying was 40% lower at level 100, which, is helpful, but not as helpful as I made it sound. As well, they increased the stack limit of elixirs up to 99 instead of 20, and they've also added another stash tab so you can purchase that with gold now. That part, all that is exactly as promised, no surprises here. They also restored exit dungeon cast time to 3 seconds, which I think is sort of funny, honestly, but hey, at least they've shown some willingness to go back on something from patch 1.1, I guess. Then we have a massive fix for the Sorcerer's Caged Heart of Spell Breaking, now gone from giving Sorcerer resistances to various elements to giving them damage reduction after taking elemental damage, which is far better in the current state of the game. They knew resistances were broken, they made a Malignant Heart based around resistances, they put it in without fixing resistances, and all it took was a couple of weeks for them to realize, wait a second, that was silly, we should just make a general damage reduction. And now they are. After that, we mostly just have bug fixes then, but of course some of these bug fixes that they're just sort of sweeping under the rug are actually important for us to be aware of. For example, they fixed the interaction between the Determination Malignant Heart that makes resource drain effects less effective, and the resource burn affix on Nightmare Dungeons. But it's also worth noting that the resource burn affix is going to be actually removed from sigils dropped in the future once this patch drops, so this change will only be effective on sigils that already have it before the patch. They fixed small critters exploding with Death Pulse affix, they theoretically fixed the malfunction on the reset dungeon button, which players realized was happening if you died within the dungeon. They fixed the aspect of Berserk ripping for Barbarian, as well as the issue with the focused Rage Heart giving crit chance to irrelevant skills that didn't do damage. They also fixed some wording on the Moon Rage Heart for Druids, as well as fixing an issue with the Call of the Wild, an aspect of Stampede legendary not working properly with companions both passively and actively. So this patch should just generally really give a big pop to companion builds for Druid. Even if they don't become meta, of course, they will still be way better than they were right now. Then Necromancer has had Blood Orbs summoned at a time limited to 30 instead of being unlimited, and most importantly for Necromancer, they have fixed the imperfectly balanced passive. It was broken to only allow 1 point in it since patch 1.1, which was just a nerf to Necro basically, and this upcoming patch fixes that back to the way it should be. Then finally for Sorcerer, they fixed the issue with the Oculus Wand, teleporting you into terrain on random occasions, putting you in the floor, putting you in a wall. It clearly wasn't supposed to do that. I know it says random locations, but that doesn't mean literally random. There should be limits to it, and now they're fixing it. After that, we have a bunch of more general bug fixes until we reach the season-specific section here. Most importantly here in this little clump is a change to the Heart the Barber. It now no longer absorbs damage from other players when the window is activated when you get a crit. It only counts your own damage. This isn't a nerf to the Barber. In fact, if anything, it is a buff to people not playing Barber. It's a buff to group content. Because the problem with the Barber is for some classes and some builds, the absorption period actually blocks you from proccing certain on hits or lucky hit effects. Other builds, it doesn't affect that, but for some of them it does. So if one person is applying the Barber, and that means that everyone has to deal with that, this is actually a nerf to the group as a whole. So the fact that they've removed that is a buff to group play, just as a whole. It doesn't hurt Barber users in the slightest, so in other words, keep barbing on, y'all. And then that's it really. All of the changes in the patch notes that we have to look forward to heading into patch 1.1.1 next week. A lot of it is just repeating what we already knew though, really, about the patch due to the Campfire Chat stream that happened. Some of that info though has changed a bit, and some things were simply expanded on more in the actual proper patch notes than they were in the stream itself. Not to mention that there are a few bug fixes that affect all of us in a greater way that weren't touched on at all within the stream itself. All that said, these patch notes are pretty tame, really. They don't make me less excited for the patch, they don't make me more excited for the patch. I think they did a good job of preparing expectations properly with the Campfire Chat stream. I think the only thing to keep an eye on as far as the patch itself from here is if these notes change at all in the near future. After all of this is subject to changes of varying severity until the patch actually comes out, just in case their QA testing finds something to not quite feel quite right. So let's hope that only good changes are happening between now and the release of the patch itself, because right now I have nothing negative to say about this one, other than I wish some of this stuff had come sooner, and I wish a few more things were addressed in the patch itself. But as far as what we are actually being given here, it is all in fact good stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown of the patch notes then. Keep an eye out on the channel and I'll make sure you know if there are any changes being added over the next few days. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.